The courtroom was silent, heavy with tension, as the bright studio lights hit Judge Greg Mathis sitting tall in his chair. His face carried the same tough look that had made him a household name for years. The crowd, nearly 200 people packed into the studio, leaned forward in their seats, waiting to watch the same thing they had always seen: Judge Mathis taking control, lecturing someone, and walking away with the last word. But today felt different. Across from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Her blazer was sharp, her posture calm, and her eyes carried the kind of confidence that made it clear she wasn't here to play the part of a nervous guest. She looked ready for a fight. Judge Mathis leaned forward, his voice deep and commanding. He came at her fast, calling out her record and questioning whether she was truly fighting for justice, or just another politician chasing attention. The crowd gasped. This was supposed to be a safe stage for the judge, his domain, his rules. But Crockett didn't shrink back. She didn't dodge. Instead, she smiled, not the fake smile of someone trying to save face, but the steady smile of someone who had walked into this room with a plan. In that single moment, the power in the room began to shift. Everyone watching could feel it. The man who had built his entire career on breaking others down was about to face something he had never prepared for. Someone who came armed with truth, proof, and the will to flip his entire courtroom against him. The stage was set, and the next few minutes would change everything. For more than 2 decades, Judge Greg Mathis had sat in that leather chair with the confidence of a man untouchable. He wasn't just another television personality. To millions of viewers, he was the voice of hard truth, the strict father figure who cut through excuses and demanded accountability. He had built his empire on that image. Tough, wise, and never afraid to call someone out. But behind the stern face and booming voice, Mathis had grown restless. He had started calling out what he labeled Twitter politicians, mocking young lawmakers who seemed to spend more time going viral than passing laws. To him, hashtags weren't policy, and followers weren't voters. His producers had even helped him put together a thick briefing book, page after page of talking points and statistics meant to pin down Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and prove she was all show and no substance. Mathis thought he was walking into the easiest win of his career. What he didn't see coming was the woman sitting across from him. Jasmine Crockett didn't come from political royalty or family wealth. She was born and raised in St. Louis, the daughter of a single mother who worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. Crockett fought her way up, first as a defense attorney, then as a civil rights lawyer, and finally as a rising star in Congress. Her reputation was built on cases nobody else wanted, taking on police departments, corrupt officials, and corporations with money to burn. She wasn't just known in courtrooms, she had turned committee hearings in Washington into viral moments, grilling executives and government leaders with sharp, pointed questions that cut right through scripted answers. Her strength wasn't in sound bites, it was in preparation. And when Judge Mathis tried to use his stage to humiliate her, he didn't realize she had spent her whole career standing tall in rooms where the odds were stacked against her. The duel began the way it always did on his show. Mathis leaned forward, his robe flowing as he delivered his opening strike. He rattled off her record in Congress, accused her of chasing cameras instead of results, and demanded to know what laws she had passed that made any real difference. The crowd nodded along, murmuring in agreement. This was the Mathis they had come to see, the no-nonsense judge who never let anyone off easy. But then, something happened that no one expected. Crockett didn't stumble. She didn't dodge. Instead, she locked eyes with him and asked a simple question: "Judge, when was the last time you were in a real courtroom trying real cases, not just playing one on television?" The room shifted. The crowd, used to seeing guests shrink under his authority, suddenly grew restless. People whispered. Camera operators leaned in. For the first time, Mathis wasn't the one controlling the tempo. Mathis tried to push harder. He adjusted his robe, narrowed his eyes, and doubled down. He pointed to her criminal justice reform bill, the one she had championed so loudly online, and sneered that it had been sitting in committee for months with no progress. To him, that was proof that Crockett was more about headlines than hard work. "Real people are waiting," he barked. "Meanwhile, you're tweeting." The crowd gasped, some even nodding, thinking the judge had landed the knockout punch. But Crockett wasn't rattled. She leaned forward, her voice calm but cutting, and dropped the first bombshell. "Judge, while you're talking about my bill being delayed, maybe we should talk about the $2.3 million contract your production company just signed with a private prison corporation. The same people who are lobbying against reform. Does that sound like justice to you?" The audience froze. Gasps filled the air. Even the producers behind the cameras looked like they had been slapped. They weren't prepared for this. Their entire plan had been to corner Crockett, not the other way around. But now, the Congresswoman had turned the spotlight on Mathis himself. Suddenly, the power dynamics flipped. This wasn't about whether Crockett had passed a bill yet, it was about whether Mathis could explain why he was taking money from the very system he claimed to fight against. The tension was suffocating. People in the audience leaned forward, phones in hand, recording every second. Behind the scenes, producers whispered frantically into their headsets, unsure if they should cut to commercial or let the chaos play out. Mathis tried to push back, raising his voice and insisting his business deals had nothing to do with his views. But his words sounded shaky, not like the confident judge America was used to. Crockett sat steady, letting the silence hang, letting his discomfort fill the room. For years, Mathis had been the one in control, the one delivering the last word. But now, it was different. His authority was on trial, and every attempt to reclaim it only made him look weaker. The conflict was no longer just about one congresswoman's record or one judge's reputation. It had become something bigger, a battle of credibility. On one side stood Judge Mathis, a man who built his career on the image of unshakable authority. On the other was Jasmine Crockett, a fighter who had come prepared with facts, evidence, and the kind of calm under fire that no script could anticipate. The crowd could feel it. The producers could feel it. Even Mathis himself could feel it. The trap he had set was closing, but not on Crockett. It was closing on him. The moment everyone had been waiting for finally came, and it came fast. Jasmine Crockett leaned back in her chair, reached down into her briefcase, and calmly pulled out a thick folder. The way she handled it, slow and steady, was enough to make the entire courtroom hold its breath. Inside were the receipts, real, tangible evidence that no one expected her to bring. She flipped the folder open, pulled out the first set of papers, and held them up for the cameras. "This," she said firmly, "is a contract between Judge Mathis Production Company and Correct Solutions, one of the largest private prison operators in the country." Gasps shot through the room. Phones flew into the air as audience members started recording, realizing they were witnessing something historic. Crockett didn't stop. She read aloud from the document, her voice sharp and unwavering. Every word cut deeper, payments totaling millions, signed only weeks ago, at the exact same time Mathis had begun attacking criminal justice reform advocates. Judge Mathis' expression shifted in seconds. The confident smirk he had carried since the start was gone. At first, he tried to laugh it off, waving a hand as if to say it meant nothing. But his voice cracked when he spoke. "That's just business. Business has nothing to do with my views on justice." He tried to sound firm, but his tone betrayed him. The authority he always wielded so easily was slipping away. His voice got louder, harsher, but it wasn't strength, it was panic. The man who had silenced hundreds of guests over the years was suddenly the one scrambling to defend himself. Crockett didn't let up. She pulled out another paper, this one an email, and read it word for word. "Thank you for agreeing to help shift the narrative on criminal justice reform. Having Judge Mathis challenge their effectiveness will be incredibly valuable to our legislative strategy." The room exploded. Shouts, gasps, even boos came from the audience that had once been his loyal fans. The camera zoomed in on Mathis' face, and for the first time in decades of television, the great judge looked trapped. With the weight of the crowd now behind her, Crockett rose from her chair. Her heels clicked against the floor as she walked across the courtroom like a lawyer closing in on a guilty witness. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm made every word hit harder. "Judge, you asked me what I've accomplished. Let me tell you." She pulled out another set of documents and listed her record one by one. The Second Chance Act, passed with bipartisan support to reduce recidivism. The Police Accountability Act, fast-tracked in the Senate. Bail reform measures that had gained national traction. These weren't tweets. They weren't soundbites. They were laws, bills, and policies that touched real lives. Then she turned and pointed straight at him. "While I've been changing laws, you've been cashing checks. While I've been freeing people, you've been signing contracts with the people who profit from keeping them locked up. While I've been fighting corruption, you've been sitting here pretending to fight for justice while getting paid by the very system that breaks it." Every word echoed like a hammer against the bench. The audience jumped to their feet, clapping, shouting, recording, unable to hold back the eruption of energy. Mathis tried one last time to take control, but his words fell flat. He stammered, repeated himself, and finally sat back in his chair with nothing left to say. The once mighty judge, the man who had ruled his stage for over 20 years, was silent. Crockett stood tall in the center of the courtroom, her presence filling every corner of the room. Then she delivered the final blow, the line that would be replayed millions of times online. "I've changed laws, freed people, and taken on corruption. You've just talked about it. And now, everyone knows the difference." The audience erupted in thunderous applause, standing on their feet as if they had just witnessed the ending of a championship fight. Phones streamed live, social media lit up instantly, and the control room producers knew they had lost any chance of cutting away. This was history being made. Judge Greg Mathis, silenced in his own courtroom, left staring at the woman who had just dismantled his entire reputation in front of the world. It was the kill shot, clean and final. The power he had carried for decades was gone, and Jasmine Crockett had taken it with nothing more than preparation, truth, and fearless delivery. The studio had barely gone dark when the internet caught fire. Clips of Jasmine Crockett's takedown spread faster than anyone could keep up with. By the time the West Coast broadcast had finished, hashtags like #CrockettExposesMathis and #PrisonMoneyJudge were everywhere. In less than an hour, hundreds of thousands of people were sharing the video. Some were in pure shock, others in awe, and many simply couldn't believe what they had just seen. Comments poured in. "I've watched Judge Mathis for 20 years and never seen him this rattled. She came ready with receipts, that's how you do it. This is bigger than TV, this is the truth coming out." Phones in the audience had already streamed the moment live, and by morning, it had become one of the most replayed clips of the year. Mainstream media jumped in immediately. CNN ran it under the banner "Congresswoman turns the tables on Judge." MSNBC called it a masterclass in preparation. Even Fox News, usually critical of Democrats, admitted Crockett had handled herself with skill and composure. Fact-checkers spent days digging through the papers she revealed and confirmed every single one as legitimate. That confirmation triggered a wave of investigations. Reporters uncovered not just one, but years of financial ties between Mathis business ventures and companies tied to prisons, bail bonds, and law enforcement suppliers. The man who had built his career on lecturing others about accountability was now being forced to answer for his own secrets. For Judge Mathis, the fall was swift. Within a week, major sponsors pulled their ads from his show. Ratings dropped by almost a third. Newspapers that had once celebrated him ran front-page stories questioning his credibility. His loyal fanbase felt betrayed, asking why he never disclosed his business connections. What had been his greatest strength, his reputation as a tough, honest voice, crumbled almost overnight. For the first time in his career, Mathis was not the one controlling the narrative. For Jasmine Crockett, the opposite happened. Her congressional office was flooded with calls and emails, most of them praising her courage and preparation. Donations to her campaign surged, even though her re-election was years away. More importantly, her legislative agenda suddenly gained momentum. The Second Chance Act picked up new co-sponsors, including Republicans who had previously ignored it. The Police Accountability Act, once stuck in committee, was pushed toward a full vote. Overnight, she wasn't just a rising star, she became a symbol of a new kind of leadership. Someone unafraid to face power head-on, and someone who proved that facts could outlast bluster. The impact reached far beyond the two people in that courtroom. Media outlets were forced to confront their own standards, with several networks adopting stricter rules on disclosing financial ties. Political strategists replayed the confrontation like coaches studying game film, pointing to it as a turning point in how younger leaders could handle hostile interviews. For women in politics, especially women of color, Crockett's performance became a blueprint for what it looks like to flip the script and command the room. In the end, the moment stood as more than just viral drama. It revealed the cracks in a system built on image, not truth. A television judge who thrived on authority was exposed in his own house, and a congresswoman many underestimated proved that preparation and courage could topple decades of power. As the clip continued to circle the globe, one thing became clear: this wasn't just a clash of personalities, it was a reminder that accountability belongs to everyone, no matter how high they sit.